The Arizona sun had barely kissed the horizon when Brandt first laid eyes on her. The desert was in one of its quiet moods, too quiet, really, with only the wind scraping over the jagged stones for company. He was out checking the boundaries of his new claim, a rugged piece of land full of dust, thorns, and old memories, when a thin curl of smoke caught his eye, rising from the canyon rim. His first thought was wildfire. He spurred his horse forward, dropping into the hollow where the smoke originated. What he found wasn't a wildfire. It was a burned-out wagon, two bodies still and lifeless in the morning light, and a single girl, clinging to life by a thread. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, and one ankle was pinned beneath a shattered wagon wheel. Dust caked her scraped skin, but her eyes, they burned with a clarity that the desert sun couldn't bake out of her. She tried to pull away as he got closer, a wild, trapped thing, but the heavy timber held her fast. Cole dismounted and knelt beside her. "Easy now," he said, his voice soft, trying to soothe her. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her gaze was a sharp, untrusting thing. She didn't believe him, not for a single second. But she was too weak to fight, too spent to do anything but watch him. He took out his knife and cut the ropes from her wrists. Then, with a grunt of effort, he lifted the heavy wheel just enough for her to pull her leg free. She let out a sharp gasp, not of fear, but of pride. He saw it plain as day. Even as tears stung her eyes from the pain, she refused to show him any weakness. Cole lifted her into his arms, careful as he could be. She was lighter than a sack of grain. He settled her in front of him on his horse, and they rode through the swirling dust, back towards his ranch. By the time the shadow of his barn fell over them, she had fainted. He carried her inside and laid her gently on a clean pile of hay. He brought water and a cloth, carefully cleaning the cuts on her arms and face. Hours drifted by in the quiet of the barn before she finally stirred. When her eyes fluttered open, the initial confusion quickly hardened into defiance. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "Safe," he said, though even to his own ears the word felt hollow and uncertain in the vast, dangerous desert. She tried to sit up, a flicker of that same defiant energy returning, but cried out in pain and fell back. "Don't move," he cautioned. "You've lost a lot of blood." She stared up at the barn's rafters, her voice laced with bitterness. "You should have left me for the buzzards." Cole took a moment before answering. "Maybe," he admitted quietly. "But I ain't got that kind of heart." As night fell, the desert cooled. Cole brought her a bowl of thin stew and a cup of water, helping her sit up against the saddle he'd propped behind her. She ate slowly, her eyes never leaving his, watching his every move. When she was done, he moved to help her to the small cot he'd set up. She stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Let me stand," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He hesitated, then stepped back. Straining, her legs shaking like a newborn foal's, she pushed herself upright. She swayed, barely holding on, but she stood. The lantern light caught the sharp lines of her face, and for the first time, Cole saw fire there instead of fear. "I'm not broken," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Never thought you were," Cole said, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He'd seen plenty of tough men break under less. Outside, the desert wind howled its lonely song, but inside the barn, something had shifted. A connection had been forged between two strangers from different worlds, bound together by a moment of violence and an act of mercy. Whatever horror she had fled, whatever nightmare had left her tied and broken in that canyon, it was still out there. And the desert, unforgiving and vast, would soon test whether his mercy was a mark of courage or a fatal weakness. The hours crawled by, each one heavier than the last. Cole sat on his porch, his lantern turned down low, his eyes scanning the empty, moonlit desert. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Inside the barn, the girl Naeli, she'd finally told him, slept a fitful, feverish sleep. Her words from earlier echoed in his mind, a quiet warning that felt more like a prophecy. You just started something you can to stop. A low rumble of thunder rolled in from the west, a rare sound in this dry land. The rain began as a fine mist, barely settling the dust, before turning into a steady, pounding downpour on the tin roof of the barn. And then he saw them, fires flickering to life along the ridge. They were too organized, too deliberate to be caused by lightning. Apache riders, they were coming. Cole grabbed his rifle from its place by the door. The sound of him cocking the hammer made Naeli shoot upright on her cot, fear finally cutting through her fever. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. He just nodded, his face grim. "Yeah, and they aren't here to shake hands." A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the drumming rain, the heavy electric moment right before the storm breaks. "If they take me," she said, her voice gaining a strange sort of calm, "don't fight. You can't win." He looked over at her, his expression steady. "That ain't who I am." He checked his rifle one last time, his eyes locked on the approaching threat, now just dark shapes moving through the rain-swept darkness. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in a brilliant, terrifying flash. The barn, the rain, the determined look on Cole's face, and the riders closing in. In that instant, Cole knew the time to turn back was long gone. The choice had been made back in the canyon. This girl, Naeli, she might be the reason he lost everything he'd worked for. Or maybe, just maybe, she was the reason he might finally find a piece of peace worth fighting for. The first shot rang out, and the night exploded. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you then?